Aetherdrift is one of the most unique sets we've ever seen in Magic the Gathering. With hot mechanics and exciting new designs, there's a lot to get your engines revving. I'm NicPlz, and today we're breaking down some of the most exciting cards from the new set that can be found in Limited, Standard, and Commander. My co-writer Sasha Jelton and I have compiled a list full of cards that we believe will be turbocharged and stepping onto the trophy stand. First, we have the format of Limited. Whether it's pre-release or draft, you're bound to have a ton of fun with this set. We'll be breaking down some of the most powerful commons and uncommons we think will feel the top decks. For white, we have Glory Heath Lynx, which is a generically strong card that can work well in a number of white builds. It's a 2/3 for 2 with lifelink. Whenever this creature attacks while saddled, search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Plus, it costs 2 to saddle. Good overall stats, great for racing, and helps find lands so you don't miss a drop. Interface Ace is less broad and more focused on vehicle builds. It's a 0/4 robot pilot for 2. This creature saddles mounts and crews vehicles using its toughness rather than its power. Whenever this creature becomes tapped during your turn, untap it. This ability only triggers once per turn. Being able to crew or saddle for 4 twice in a turn cycle is huge if you're leaning into vehicles or mounts. Then we have Sundial Dawn Tyrant. This is a vanilla 3/3 creature for only 2. There's an entire cycle of these legendary creatures, but we feel the white one is the best. They can act as some really well-statted creatures, which can be awesome filler in limited decks. Now, blue has a lot going on for it in the theme of affinity. Memory Guardian and the reprint Gearseeker Serpent are awesome creatures for affinity. The Guardian is also an artifact itself, so it helps with the reduction costs of other affinity cards. And the Serpent can be made unblockable to help finish out games. A Ranger's Refueler is great for affinity, but also for any builds leaning into the exhaust mechanic. It gives you card draw whenever you activate an exhaust ability. Plus, for 4 mana, it becomes a creature with a +1/+1 counter on it and no longer needs to be crewed. Now, Transit Mage can also be helpful in an artifact deck since it can tutor up a powerful 4 or 5 drop artifact. This specifically finding Memory Guardian is excellent. Now, Scrounging Skyray is an awesome payoff in a deck leaning into the cycle ability, which there is plenty of in this set. A 1/2 flyer for 2 is not bad stats. Plus, whenever you discard 1 or more cards, put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. Now, a standout for black is the 5/4 creature Chitin Gravestalker. This spell costs 1 less for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard. Plus, it has a cycling for 2. This is going to be great in any self-mill deck, especially the Golgari ones. Then we have the artifact Grim Bauble, which can be great in a variety of builds. For only 1 black mana, when this artifact enters, target creature an opponent control gets -2/-2 until end of turn. You can also pay 2 generic and 1 black, sack it, and then surveil 2. The stats by themselves are good, but it gets even better in an affinity or Golgari self-mill deck. And lastly, for black, a card to be looking for is Packdoll Terror. Whenever this creature or another artifact you control enters, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is awesome in any build that utilizes the start your engine mechanic and the affinity builds that dip into black. Now, for red, we have some hot stuff. Magmakin Artillerist, Marauding Mako, and Field of Flames are great in the cycling discard builds. Magmakin Artillerist and Marauding Mako are amazing payoffs for when you're discarding, especially when it's done with cycling. Field of Flames is a great instant speed sweeper if your opponent has small creatures, but then can be cycled if they don't. And of course, red has some awesome removal in this set. Lightning Strike, Road Rage, and Outpace Oblivion will all help with spot removal. But Outpace Oblivion will additionally help increase your speed if you aren't already at the max by burning your opponents. Keep an eye out for all of these great red removal spells. Now, speaking of great removal spells, green has some as well. If you're in any green deck, Plow Through and Run Over are the removal spells to be looking for. Both will help you keep your big creatures dominating the board. Now, if you're going for a self-mill build, then you need to be looking out for Dredger's Insight, a 2-drop enchantment that reads, whenever 1 or more artifact and or creature cards leave your graveyard, you gain 1 life. When this enchantment enters, mill 4 cards, you may put an artifact, creature, or land card from among the milled cards into your hand. If you're building a mill deck, you need to get as many of these as you possibly can. Now, if you're going for a build utilizing the exhaust ability, Elvish Refueler is the card you want to be looking out for. It's an elf druid creature card with, during your turn, as long as you haven't activated an exhaust ability this turn, you may activate exhaust abilities as though they haven't been activated. And itself has exhaust for 1 generic and 1 green, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This card unlocks all of your exhaust abilities so you can use them more than once. This card provides incredible value if you have a deck full of exhaust cards. And lastly, in green, we have the Hazard of the Dunes. It has trample and reach on a 4/4 body. It has exhaust for 6 generic and 1 green, giving it 3 +1/+1 counters. A 4/4 for 4 with 2 relevant keywords is solid, but being able to make it even bigger in the late game can help you end a game very quickly. Now for multicolor signpost cards, we felt this lineup was the strongest of all of them. Voyage Home is going to be an all-star in affinity builds. Reducing this by 2 or more will get you incredible value. Draw 3 cards and gain 3 life for as little as 2 is just bonkers. Sky Serpent Seeker will provide some amazing ramp in any Simic deck while also being a pain for your opponents to get through. Embalmed Descendant is really just great value in any black-white deck. It's awesome with the Start Your Engines mechanic, gives you a 2/2 zombie when it enters, and eventually can turn into a Blood Artist. But Gastro Thrill Seeker is the premier Start Your Engines card. When it enters, you will immediately get to speed 2 if you haven't started your engines yet, and in the late game, it can enter with Death Touch and Haste if you have speed 4. Rocketeer Boost Buggy is just good value in stats and Gruul. It's an easy crew 1, and whenever it attacks, you get a treasure token. And for 3 mana, it becomes an artifact creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. You cannot be mad at those stats. And lastly, for colorless, we have the cards Guidelight Matrix and Scrap Compactor. Guidelight Matrix is the glue for vehicle decks as it helps you get around the mountain crewing by only paying 2 and tapping it. Additionally, it can be great for any affinity deck looking for more artifacts that can just sit and play. And Scrap Compactor is a great option for affinity decks. For 3, tap and sack, deal 3 damage to a creature, and for 6, tap and sack, destroy target creature or vehicle. Playing it early to enable your affinity cards, then sacking it later to answer any creature card will pair nicely with your game plan. Next, we have the format of Standard. This list is focused on cards that Sasha and I think will be a lot of fun for potential brewers to play around with in the format. First, we have to call out the Verge land cycles. It's exciting to see more of these so quickly, followed up from their debut in the Duskborn set. As we all know, the Triome lands rotated out of Standard last year, so any new untapped dual lands help out in the format even if they're not as powerful as the Triomes. For reprints in the format, we have Spell Pierce, which we'll see play given its history in competitive formats. Having Spell Pierce in the format will always make one untapped blue mana a question of do they have it. And back in Standard, we have Bloodghast, a very powerful recursion effect that still sees some modern play. It will not be surprising to find it popping up in some Standard graveyard lists soon. But let's move on to new cards in the set for Standard. For white, we have Light Wheel Enhancements, a 1/1 enchantment aura. You can enchant a creature or a vehicle. It has Start Your Engines. If you have no speed, it starts at 1. It increases once each on your turns when an opponent loses life. Max speed is 4. Enchanted permanent gets +1/+1 and has Vigilance. And max speed, you may cast this card from your graveyard. Now there's no guarantee there will be a shell for this since the jury is out on how easy it will be to get max speed. But being able to cast this card from the graveyard when it's enabled is quite strong, especially for some of the Enchantress Eerie decks. Next in blue we have Repurposing Bay, which will be a strong build around with plenty of combo potential. It's a 3-drop enchantment that has pay 2 and tap, sacrifice another artifact, search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. This is an effect similar to Birthing Pod, but for artifacts. Historically, this kind of effect can be incredibly powerful. With the addition of several artifacts with affinity in this set, you'll be able to play a Memory Guardian for only 1 mana, and eventually turn it into any 6-drop artifact in your deck. It will be a strong card that will give birth to at least one new deck trying to leverage its powerful ability. We're excited to see what brewers do with this one. Next up is Gas Guzzler. It has Start Your Engines. This creature enters tap. Max speed, 1 black, sacrifice another creature or vehicle, draw a card. Any deck that wants to lean into the Start Your Engines mechanic will love this card. It's a solid 1-drop that can start the mechanic off on turn 1, and it turns into a fantastic card advantage sack outlet as soon as you hit max speed. Now for red, we are excited about House Squad Heavy, a 2/3 Goblin Mercenary for 2 generic and 1 red. It has Start Your Engines. Other goblins you control have haste. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. That token attacks this combat if able. Max speed and tap. Add a red mana for each goblin you control. This one feels akin to the classic Goblin Rabblemaster. There hasn't been a goblin deck in Standard for a minute, but after the Kindred Goblin support we got in Foundations, it might be worth giving this one a shot. It's hard to tell just how powerful this card could be, but there is a lot for for brewers to play around with. Now in green, we have Afterburner Expert. It has exhaust, 2 generic and 2 green. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. Activate each exhaust ability only once. And whenever you activate an exhaust ability, return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now it is hard to tell if there's going to be enough strong exhaust abilities to help support this card, but coming back into play for no additional cost is very powerful. Aggressively milling yourself, then returning multiple 4/2s to the battlefield is nothing to sleep on. And an additional creature like the Elvish Refueler would likely be an auto-include in an exhaust build around. It itself has exhaust, but the first ability helps greatly synergize. During your turn, as long as you haven't activated an exhaust ability this turn, you may activate exhaust abilities as though they haven't been activated. Again, we'll see if there's enough support for this set to leverage this build around, but these 2 cards alone do give brewers some options. Now a multicolor spell that stood out to us is Gastel Thrillseeker, a 2/3 lizard berserker that has start your engines. When this creature enters, it deals 1 damage to target opponent and you gain 1 life. Max speed, this creature has death touch and haste. Now we all know that lizards already have a solid deck, but this by itself gives a strong base to enable any max speed abilities. But Voyage Home could be an Affinity All-Star if brewers can find the right type of support for it. It feels very much akin to Thoughtcast. Drawing 3 cards and gaining 3 life is excellent value when it's reduced to only a 2-drop. The question really is, will the meta allow Affinity to emerge as a strong deck? But regardless, we already know that people will be trying it out because of the timeless appeal. Now for colorless, the standout card here is Monument to Endurance, a 3-drop artifact that reads, whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Draw a card, create a treasure token, and each opponent loses 3 life. This again would need to be a build around and a deck to support it, but the card is so strong that it could honestly be the center of a very powerful build. Remember, cycling counts as discarding, so there are a ton of tools to potentially enable this strategy. There's a lot to be excited about when a card with this much sheer power presents itself in the meta. Now lastly, we have the format of Commander. Sasha and I built this list around cards that we believe are innovative, exciting, and unique. They are all powerful cards, but are not also purely focused on what are pushing stats. But I can promise you that all of these cards are going to be a ton of fun. First up, we have Guardian Sunmare, a 5/5 5-drop horse mount. It has Ward 2 and a saddle cost of 4. But most importantly, whenever this creature attacks while saddled, search your library for a non-land permanent card with mana value 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This card stood out because of the ability to cheat out any non-land permanent that's 3 or less. We see 3 or less written on a lot of white cards. However, the ability to not only tutor but also cheat out non-land permanents feels unique. It's a bit higher on the mana curve, but in the late game, it could absolutely take over the game. Plus, it is a horse for any of you Shadowfax or third players out there. Now for blue, we are really liking Waxen Shape Thief. It isn't necessarily the most busted blue card this set has to offer, not by a long shot. However, it does offer a lot of versatility. It's a 0/0 shapeshifter for 4 mana. It has flash, which is excellent, and you may have this creature enter as a copy of an artifact or creature you control. And lastly, it has Cycle 2, which rounds it out to be a very flexible card. Next up is a black commander that we are seriously excited about, and that is Gonti Knight Minister. It's a 3/4 for 4 and has a very unique ability as a commander. Whenever a player casts a spell they don't own, that player creates a treasure token. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller looks at the top card of that opponent's library and exiles it face down. They may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. Mana of any type can be spent to cast a spell this way. Look, Gonti is known for being a thief, but this Gonti allows everybody at the table to also be a thief. As a commander, this deck will want to go wide with lots of small evasive creatures that can't be blocked or have flying, death touch, or menace. The only problem we see with this Gonti is if you're up against a deck that can go wider than you, because they might be able to beat you at your own game. But at any rate, this is a unique commander and will likely generate wild and fun games at any table. The original Gonti was my first commander, so I'm definitely thinking about building this one. Next, we have Count on Luck, a red enchantment for 3 red. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. For mono red decks, this is just flat out amazing card advantage. Think of it like a Phyrexian Arena for mono red, and it gets better if your deck already has synergies that pair well with exiled cards. We can see this card making an appearance in plenty of mono red decks. In green, we have the instant Defend the Rider. Now at first glance, you might think, wait, what? But hear me out, this is a very versatile card. For 1 green, you choose 1. Target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Or create a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token with this token saddles mounts and crews vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. For 1 green mana, this is an excellent rate. This kind of card often feels like a green counterspell when you need to protect an important commander or other powerful permanents. This card can fizzle a removal spell or negate a traditional board wipe. And additionally, the second ability allows you to work around edict effects that would otherwise force you to sacrifice a very valuable creature. For multicolored, we have another exciting commander that caught our eyes, and that is Captain Howler's Sea Scourge. It's a 5/4 shark pirate that has Ward 2, pay 2 life. And whenever you discard 1 or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn for each card discarded this way. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. Now this is a very unique commander that has a high ceiling. With the help of wheel effects, this captain can one-shot opponents. But you can also synergize with individual discard effects that end up giving this ability to multiple creatures you control. That then helps you consistently draw an enormous amount of cards during your turn. This is going to be a really fun commander that has a ton of fresh stuff to build around. Now for colorless, Sasha and I could not believe our eyes. Monument to Endurance is just flat out good value. A 3-drop artifact that reads, whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Draw a card, create a treasure token, or each opponent loses 3 life. A good example of how powerful this card is in my favorite commander deck, Ashling Flame Dancer. Ashling can often rummage at least 3 times per turn. Now that's each player's turn. So I could very consistently draw a card, create a treasure token, and have each opponent lose 3 life on each player's turn. And that's on top of the Magecraft triggers that already exist on Ashling. This is going to be such a powerful card and anything that can easily discard 3 cards per turn. It could honestly tip the scales on decks that were already very powerful. Additionally, we have another powerful artifact, and that is Aetheric Amplifier. This is one from the Living Energy Precon. It's a 3-drop mana rock that taps for any color, but more importantly, for 4 mana and tap. Choose 1, activate only as a sorcery. Double the number of each kind of counters on target permanent, or double the number of each kind of counter you have. This is so powerful in a deck that is doing big things with counters, and can be very explosive in a deck that has energy or experience counters. Amazing value, and we expect to see this one pop up in quite a few deck lists. Lastly, we do want to call out the powerful energy generation and payoff of both Nissa, World Soul Speaker, and Aetherflux Conduit. Nissa allows you to get 2 energy per landfall trigger, which means that a fetch land can get you 4 energy each. It allows you to pay 8 energy rather than pay the mana cost for permanent spells you cast. Then with Aetherflux Conduit, you can have even more energy generation and an even bigger payoff if you are generating wild amounts of energy. Because whenever you cast a spell, you get an amount of energy counters equal to the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. And tap. Pay 50 energy, draw 7 cards. You may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. This is just so wild to see on an energy card. Both of these cards are going to give the energy decks a huge boost, all while being a lot of fun. Honestly, this makes me want to build an energy deck soon. Now you are ready to speed into Limited, Standard, and Commander with all of the new exciting cards from Aetherdrift. Which cards and decks are you looking forward to brewing around most? Let us know in the comments which cards and formats you're most excited about. And make sure to get out to your local game store for a pre-release event of Aetherdrift to play in person. This set is also coming to Arena, so don't forget to check it out there too. I'm NicPlz, and that is our checkered flag, so get out there and enjoy this fun new set.